Greetings and bienvenue, Midnight Crew. Thank you for returning to this broadcast, and welcome to new viewers joining us for the first time. If you like a video, then feel free to subscribe.
I lived in a house with a huge poltergeist problem for 4 months when I was a teenager. Nothing was odd the first couple of weeks, but then once we settled in, it started. My mom worked most of the day since she had 2 jobs and my dad was a truck driver. Most of the time it was just me and my 2-year-old brother in the house. It started with cold spots. I remember it was summer in South Texas, so it's hot as fuck as it is every year in this region. The AC was on but at a moderate temperature because mom got cold quickly. Anyway, me and my little brother are hanging out in the living room watching a kids movie when the room starts to get super cold. Like, freezer cold. I thought I was going nuts because it had been just fine literally 1 minute ago, but my brother is also shivering and asking for a blanket. I give him one and I turn off the AC, then sit back down on the couch. Then I notice it's so damn cold at this point I can legit see my breath in the air. I walk outside the house real quick to smoke a cig real quick, started young, and it's fucking 90 degrees outside. I started getting a bit freaked out at this point, so I walked back in to let my little bro play outside while the house warms up again. I go inside the house and the temperature is just fine. Nothing cold at all. After that the real creepy shit started going down. When we'd leave the house I'd always close all the doors in the house as I have a distinct hatred for open doors for some reason. Every time we'd walk back in the house, all of them would be open. At first I thought they weren't closing properly due to faulty doorknobs or something, so I'd close them, push on them a bit to ensure they were properly closed, and sure enough, none of them would swing open even with a good push. The chairs in the dining room would move on their own. I'm not talking a couple of inches either. I'm talking they would be violently thrown across the dining room and slammed against the wall. On one occasion, by far the scariest one of them slid across the floor and into our laundry room that sat directly behind it. There was even marks on the door where it had hit it. We had a little Chihuahua dog would bark viciously at empty and dark rooms around the house and then suddenly yelp and run the fuck out of there crying and shaking. My stepdad was the only person in our home with a cell phone, early 2000s, and when he was home, he'd get phone calls from unknown numbers, and when he'd answer the calls, he could hear himself talking on the other line, as if someone from within the house was calling him and putting him on speaker, which of course was impossible. One morning I woke up to the sound of a basketball bouncing in my little bro's room. My little bro was not in that room and very rarely was, as he slept in my parents' room, nor was anyone else in the house except me and him for that matter. At this point, I'm just completely exhausted from being the only one that deals with this shit. As I said, my parents worked a lot, so I was alone for all this 99% of the time while taking care of little bro. So I carefully get up from my bed and walk slowly to the door. I hold on to the doorknob BC. I'm about to put my ear to the door, and if that motherfucker swings open and I see some weird shit or something, I'll have a fucking heart attack. So I slowly put my head to the door, and there it was, clear as fucking day. There was a ball bouncing up and down with deliberation in the room. I could even feel the vibrations in the door, as this was a fairly empty room and it was the only room in the house with wood floor instead of tile like the rest of it. I could not bring myself to open the door. My heart was pounding out of my chest, so instead I sprinted outside and looked in through the window. All I can see is the ball slowly rolling in the ground until it comes to a stop. By now, I'm so fed up with all of this I'm begging my mom to quit her afternoon job so I won't have to deal with this shit alone all the time. Even though they've experienced some weird shit themselves, they keep telling me that ghosts aren't real. We need the money, blah blah, all that bullshit. Whatever. The day after the ball incident, I was sitting in the living room when things took a turn for the extreme, when my little brother actually talked to whatever the fuck that entity in the house was. First and foremost, I'd like to apologize for the shit floor plan drawing. I don't have a computer in front of me, so I had to make it on my phone. But it's important to have a bit of a visual of the layout for the final 3 events that led me to leave the house and go live with my grandparents. Anyways, I was sitting in the living room watching TV while little bro was running around the house and playing. Sun goes down and it gets dark inside the house, but I'm lazy and I don't want to get up and turn on the lights. Little bro doesn't seem to mind, so fuck it. Anyway, I'm just sitting there minding my own business when suddenly I feel sick to my stomach. Not like nausea, but just a really bad gut feeling, hard to explain, just extremely uncomfortable. The AC has been off all day because it's been a relatively nice temperature outside, so I kept it off, but suddenly it starts getting extremely cold again. Like, I'm shivering and getting goosebumps in the fucking house. I hear little bro still playing around in the rooms and I can't see him from the living room. Something tells me to call him over. Just a strong feeling that he should not be in that darkness playing. So I call him over and he tells me he's playing and he doesn't want to. So of course I tell him I'm in charge and to get his ass over here right now. At this point the feeling in my stomach is unbearable, just pure dread and anxiety. So he finally does start walking towards the living room and he stands in the corner between the living room and the dining room. In this corner he can see me, and he can see the rest of the house in pitch black darkness. When he turns to me he's smiling and then he turns to the dark side of the house and says, "Come here. I wanna keep playing. Come on." I lost it. I got up and sprinted towards him without looking in the darkness, picked him up and took him outside the house. I told him to stay put and I ran back inside the house to see if he was talking to someone that had broken in or something. So, armed with a shitty pocket knife and with my heart pounding in my chest, I ran back inside the house to see what the fuck my brother talked to. I turned on all the lights, room by room, looked in the closets, even mustered up the courage to look in the attic, checked the back doors and all the windows, and nothing. Not a single thing that would point towards someone breaking in. I called the cops anyway and told them what happened. They sent over 2 cops and they swept the house completely and the backyard as well, and they told me the same, no signs of forced entry at all. They gave me the usual speech of, "Kids have wild imaginations, blah blah." I really wanted to believe them, but I know it isn't what happened. They ask my little brother what he saw and he just keeps saying, "My friend," over and over again. The cops leave and my mom gets there. I tell her what happened and she tells me the same. Just his imagination. I know nobody will believe me, so I just call it a night. A couple of days went by with no activity at all and I'm finally having some semblance of normalcy in the house. No noises, cold spots, doors opening, nothing at all. Even my little brother never mentions his friend again. I'm a bit relieved and take comfort in the thought that this whole ordeal may be over. That night I put him down to bed and he knocked out right away. The dog jumps up on my parents' bed right next to my brother as if saying, "Don't worry, I'll keep an eye on him." I go to my room to read some magazines and listen to some music while I get sleepy. Mags get boring and put them down and I just sit there staring at the ceiling. I zone out for a second when I realize the door to my room is wide open and I can see straight into the darkness, which I hate because, like I mentioned earlier, I do not like open doors. So I decided to get up to close it, except I didn't. For some reason, I just didn't feel like getting up to close it, so I just changed the song on my MP3 player and laid there. Which was, as I was gonna find out in about 10 seconds, a big mistake. I was laying there and for some reason, my gaze switched from the ceiling to the wide open door and into the darkness. And that's when it happened. A lady, very old looking in a gray dress with gray hair up in a bun, legitimately and deliberately, floated right past my door, clear as day, headed for my parents' room. I was not sleeping, I was not high. I know what I saw that night, and if I was more artistic I could draw her up in a second because I will never forget her and every detail about her. In retrospect, The closest thing I can tell you she looked like for reference was the bad lady from the movie, Dead Silence, but more human and less demonic, if that makes sense. I was frozen in place in my bed. I could not move. I never understood what people experienced when they went into shock until that night. There's simply nothing you can do. Your brain is trying to process the impossibility of the situation so hard it cannot do anything else. When she passed my door, the dog started barking again. So viciously and fiercely you would think he was fighting for his life. Then he yelped and sprinted out of that room so fast that he was basically a blur running past my door. I got up and out of bed and fucking ran to my parents' room filled with panic and with my heart about to explode in my chest. My brother was standing up in his crib and beginning to cry. He reached up for me, I picked him up and I went to the neighbor's house and never set foot in that house again. My mom pleaded I come back, but I really, simply could not. I asked my grandparents to let me stay and they were more than happy to accommodate me. My mom got a daycare for my bro and she quit her afternoon job to take care of him at night since I refused because I didn't want to go back there ever. She stayed at the house by herself a couple of weeks until one night she suddenly pulled up my grandparents' driveway and asked if she could stay over. She was clearly distressed, but she would not, and to this day does not, talk about what happened that made her change her mind and leave the house herself. The next day she called in to work and told them she was taking her week of vacation and told me we were getting all our stuff and putting it in a storage unit until we found a new apartment to live in. We would pack throughout the day and leave the house before sundown. Every day for a week, even though I would tell her we could get some more stuff done with the lights on, she would refuse to stay a second past sundown. We were done in about 4 days and she called the landlord. She paid him the last couple of months of the lease left over in advance and told him we weren't coming back. The dude looked visibly disappointed but understood, shook her hand, and we left for good. The next week we went to a family party at my uncle's house and my stepdad was telling my uncle about what happened and why we left early. Some lady that was my aunt's friend was overhearing the conversation closely and asked if the house was the red house in Comel Street. To which immediately replied with a resounding yes. She went on to tell us that she had lived there as well, except they only lasted 2 months and paid the 4 months left on the lease in advance to GTFO. She didn't go much into detail because she was visibly upset just reminiscing about living there, but she told me, I believe every single word of what you just described. I was at a loss for words. I knew in my heart that everything I had experienced was real, but ever since I left I had tried to rationalize every single thing that I had experienced. I guess I just didn't want to believe that it was all real, that this is real and that it could happen again if I moved to the wrong house. But with third-party confirmation, it was very hard to deny or explain everything that had happened there. And she was not the only person that was gonna confirm that all the activity in that house was real. About a month went by when another family moved in right away. The house was priced for a steal, so it never stayed in the market that long. And with only a 6-month lease it was a no-brainer. We went by about every month or so to collect random mail that was still getting delivered there. My mom got out of the car and introduced herself to the lady and the guy unpacking their U-Haul. She didn't stay long, got the mail and we left. We did the same thing next month. I knocked on the door, she answered and gave me a smile, handed me the mail, and we took off. The next month we came by, and the U-Haul was packed in the driving and they were packing up in a hurry. I couldn't believe it. I walked up the driveway and asked her what happened. She was not, unlike the lady that had lived there before us, any shy about talking about the experience. She said that the chairs in the dining room would fly against the wall by themselves. The plates in the cupboards would fall down and shatter on the floor in the middle of the night. The phone would ring and they could hear themselves talking on the other line, as if someone was calling from the same house. Same thing that had happened to us. She said her kids had seen something in the kitchen a couple of days ago that finally made them leave. She wouldn't say what, but the little guys were so upset they were just waiting for the grown-ups outside and wouldn't go inside the house. I asked them what they saw and they would just shake their heads, none of them would say. We moved to another place after a month or so, then we moved out of the town and I haven't been back there for the better part of a decade or so. I looked up the house right now on Google Maps, but I don't know if it's still occupied or not, or if it's against the rules to post it. But I would never live there again even if you paid me to. There's a lot of things out there that I simply cannot explain or understand. But that house made my skeptic ass a believer.
Damn man, I wish I could see this house myself.
If you're ever in Eagle Pass, Texas. Last I checked, it's still not rented and just sitting there.
I believe everything. It sounds fucking crazy, but I'm glad to live in a clean home. I know paranormal things really do happen. One house me and my mother lived at when I was little always felt dark and unwelcoming, and we experienced things there also. It was on the edge of town, so it was a very quiet area. We'd be sitting in total silence and suddenly hear gas hissing as if somebody took a wrench to one of the arms of a gas pipe and unscrewed it. Tighten it, and for a few hours or the next day do the same thing. We heard clear footsteps, doors opening wide enough to creak against the wall, as if somebody was forcing them with a lot of effort. The whole house in general felt terrible, not only the paranormal stuff. We also experienced weird phenomena such as blue rays of light emanating from the socket in the wall at night, electrical disturbances, even our car would make unexplainable sounds unlike anything I'd ever heard before, yet when we'd get in it and start it there was nothing wrong with the electronics. Most memorable thing that comes to mind from living there is this one night as we were getting ready to go to bed. We had the TV on the lowest volume, only me and my mother in the house. Lights off everywhere except for the bedroom we were in and the doors shut. Suddenly we heard a loud smashing sound from downstairs which sounded as if somebody had taken a tray full of silverware and threw it full force against the stone kitchen floor. Me and my mother both looked at each other in shock and thought somebody had broken in, both having heard it clearly. The light switches upstairs were across the hallway from our room. So after making our way across in the darkness calling out if anyone is there, and expecting a response, but not getting one obviously. We swept through the entire house and found nothing that could have made the noise. I've never seen figures or ghosts, nothing of that sort. Yet that house was terrifying and I wouldn't even want to go back to visit. Worst time of my childhood mostly as a result of living there, there was definitely something off about that house. I wouldn't even say it was necessarily spiritual or some sort of poltergeist, but it felt like the entire place was shrouded in negative energy. I still remember to this day that sickening sense of dread I would get every time I was over at my neighbor's place across from our garden, glancing back at this house and knowing I had no option but to return there that evening.
I hope that you enjoyed tonight's broadcast. If you enjoyed tonight's story, then please subscribe to the channel as more green texts will appear daily. A new broadcast will appear when the clock strikes midnight Central Time.